It is sunny and it's raining. Hi. I will acknowledge the fact that due to the fact that it is currently 7 p.m, the lighting could be doing some weird stuff today, and I'm not gonna blame the lighting for that. It's completely my fault for filming at 7 p.m. at night. Hello, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to being here. My name is Meekela, this is Meekela Reads. I live here and I read 13 books in November. I'm genuinely so proud of myself for reading that many books. I very much overfunctioned in November, and December we will pay for that. So these are the books, let's talk about them. If you've been here for any period of time, you will know that I participated in the Bloomin readathon in November, which is literally the only reason that I've read this many books. And as with any readathon, we had a bingo card to fulfill. Given the fact that there's 13 books, I'm just gonna start because there's no room for rambling here. See, told you, who knows what it was gonna do. It's gonna be light now. It's gonna be oversaturated and bright. It can just be. So the first book that I read in the Bloomin readathon was I Want to Die But I Want to Eat the Bookie by Beck Sahi, which is an autobiography, a memoir, obviously by the author, following her experience in being diagnosed with dysthymia, which is also known as mild persistent depression, and just all of the other things that come along with that. I had a really decent time reading this, though the themes that it explored were far too similar to experience that I've had in my own life, and so it took me a stupidly long time to read this relatively short book. I particularly really enjoyed the fact that she didn't just become cured by the end of the book, and also that she included a letter from the therapist towards the end, because I think that that's also really important to include, is that the therapist, spoiler, is quite reflective in her own practice and reiterates the fact that she may not have done the absolute best that she could have by the author and by treating her and missing things that she should have known throughout the way. So that I really appreciated, because it's quite dialectic in the way that you can know and hope that you're doing the best by someone, but also really understand that you have areas in which you can improve as well. So I read this for the ladybug space because it is pretty on the outside but relatively confronting insides. Then I listened to The Mask Falling by Samantha Shannon, which is the most coveted fourth book in the Bone Seasons series. In this we explore much more around outside of Scion, London. We follow Paige and Warden in a story that is filled with trauma and love and loss and more trauma. I really like this series, and I did not expect to like it as much as I do. I will say that the first books were probably a little bit stronger than the second two, but I definitely think that we're gearing up for a very different shift in tone in the series. The plot's coming to a head, like that kind of stuff is coming up after this, I can tell. But I actually don't know when the next ones are coming out. I don't know, and I need to know because I need more. I cannot believe this sat on my shelf for years and I just didn't know. And I read that for this one, the Mask Falling, for the variegated space on the bingo card. So if I really quickly touch base with you in regards to the bingo card, we get a free space, the ladybug space, and then we also get variegated for the Mask Falling. So this is where we're at for the minute. At this point in the readathon, I had started 5 books and had to work my way through 5 books. I then finished An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir, which I had started when I was overseas and I just hadn't finished it at that point yet. This is a very hyped fantasy quartet, and it is a dual perspective following 2 characters from opposing sides of this political society war thing that's happening. We have hidden magic. We have almost enemies to lovers. We have political intrigue. We have mummy issues. It has everything in this book. It's the whole package. Overall, it's a really good strong start to what I can tell is going to be an in-depth and complex fantasy series. It was equal parts easy to read and then also richly detailed enough that I knew what was going on. I could visualize where we were. I understood the characters and their personalities and their dynamics. I particularly enjoyed how magic was kind of like teased around because it's not quite fully developed yet. So that's something to look forward to in book 2. The dual perspective was not jarring. That is something that I'm coming to appreciate when I'm reading dual perspective fantasies, because they can like be tricky sometimes. I've read a few recently, like the Poison Study series. I found it really difficult to kind of know who was talking until someone actually spoke, and Furyborn, which was like 2 completely different books in one. But this, even though the characters were in 2 very different places or at 2 very different headspaces, you could tell where each of them was in relation to each other and the story. I also really appreciated the brutality in this and how they didn't shy away from it, but it also wasn't enough to make me really squeam and not want to read the book. One of my only criticisms about this is that the humor was a bit misplaced. There was only a few sections of like proper humor, and in contrast with the serious tone of the rest of the book, it just didn't blend all that well for me. So I'm hoping that that's something that kind of develops a bit more, because I understand that it is a really important aspect of the characters' personalities, but it just didn't mesh well. All in all, I will read number 2, and I might read the rest if number 2 intrigues me enough. What did I read this for? I read this for the dandelion space, because this has been on my TBR for a very long time, and I kicked Passenger out of that list because I'm just not even gonna try Passenger. I'm unhauling it. It's leaving my shelves. After that, I finished listening to I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy, which is the currently very popular and very well acclaimed autobiography by Jeanette McCurdy, who played Sam in iCarly. The story follows her throughout her life from childhood, getting into childhood stardom, and then the harrowing and traumatic childhood upbringing that she had in terms of her family and her work and just everything that came along with that. I feel really uncomfortable saying that I enjoyed this book because it's really uncomfy to enjoy the traumatic experiences of another person. However, it was a very, very well detailed story, and it was a really, really well communicated story, and I think that Jeanette did a really good job at making it something that wasn't incredibly difficult to read, palatable enough that the information, though incredibly traumatic and awful, was not too traumatic and awful for the reader. It's so bizarre to think that I was existing in and around this world and space when all of this was happening. I watched iCarly as it came out like most weeks. I was that kid. I was there. And it's so bizarre to me to think that all of this stuff was happening in my conscious living memory, because typically autobiographies that I read are by people either that aren't in things that I participated in or consumed, or they're old enough that I wasn't around at that point in time. Again, I think it was really important that Jeanette wasn't like magically healed at the end of the book, because that ain't how recovery goes at all. Therapy is fucking hard, and I think that she did a really, really nice job at depicting that within this story. But overall, it was very, very well done, and I'm glad that she got out of acting and into writing, because it's definitely a better path for her by the sounds of it. And I read this for the tree space because it was an autobiography, it was a non-fiction. I grew my brain from reading this. For the B space, I read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Tomorrow Times 3 is a friendship story following two friends over the span of their life as they grow together and then apart and then together again and then apart again. It is filled with just so many like fun pop culture and gaming references, as well as video game development, though an area that I don't know much about. It wasn't jarring at all to go through that in the story. Like, I did not feel at any point in time like I didn't know what was going on because of my lack of knowledge in that area. I loved this. I loved the complex dynamics of characters and how their interactions over the span of their life were like accurate in terms of growing apart and growing together, but then also none of the characters were perfect. None of them were flawless, except Marx. Marx is flawless. He is the flawless character in the series, but the rest of them, they all have their ups and downs. I didn't love any of them, but I also really loved the story in which they were in. I love the complex nature of the friendships as they move between friendship and romance, and then a friendship that's more than romance. There was so many video game themes that just felt so cozy in my soul in terms of a way to escape from reality. Much like we do with reading, video games are another way that people use to escape reality, and I can relate to that. There was depiction of chronic illness and grief and the complex dynamic of the human structure in which you can love and hate someone at exactly the same time. And I would absolutely recommend this to you if you're after a really sort of long-winded lifetime story following characters, or a bit of a character study. If that's your vibe, along with video games and character-driven stories, this is absolutely it for you in this book. And I loved it. Let's check in again. So we did Daffodil and Bee, coincidentally, are right on top of each other. I then finished listening to The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. This is my second Hosseini that I've read, and it is absolutely more traumatic than the first one I read, which was And the Mountains Echoed. This is yet another character lifetime arc story. We follow Amir. We span Amir's lifetime as he grows from being a boy living in Afghanistan to a fully grown adult man living in America, with some back and forth in between. The historical fiction, it got me this time. Please check the warnings, my friends. Please take care of your brain. Just look into it before you get into it. I had to take a hot second at one point to just recalibrate my brain because I was not ready for the events that happened. I don't know what it is about Colette Husseini, but I'm usually so moderately interested within the first like 3/4 of the book, and then the last quarter, it just hits me and I'm crying. Picture this, right? It's 5 o'clock, you're driving home, and then you look in the rearview mirror and you see me also driving home, but sobbing. Sobbing in my car in the 5 o'clock traffic is how I ended this book. Again, I feel like this genre of the historical fiction that's not exactly accurate in terms of the fact that it's still fiction, but it's kind of opening my eyes to events that I just didn't know existed in the world. Sheltered brain, learning lots. Head no longer empty, many thoughts. But overall, it is a beautiful and tragic story, and I would absolutely recommend it if like the historical fiction character story arc stories are your vibe and you can handle the trauma. I read this for the Earth space because this did not take place in my country whatsoever, which is pretty safe to say for most of the books that I own, because no one writes books about Australia except Australians. Y'all, next. I read A Psalm for the Wild-Billed and A Prayer for the Crown-Shy by Becky Chambers. Can we just take a moment? Just take a hot minute. Take in the beauty that is these covers. And then multiply that by 10, and then that's how I feel about both of these books. A Psalm for the Wild-Billed just wormed its way inside of my heart, and it hasn't left since I read it. Like, it's still there. I still think about it almost every day. I want to live within these pages, just like shrink me down and stuff me in, and then just close it, and I'll stay there forever without a complaint. This 150-page book has so much story smooshed into the pages, and it's so beautiful, it's prolific, it's cozy, it's existential. It was everything I needed and wanted and more, and it is now one of my favorite books that I have ever read. I then read A Prayer for the Crown-Shy, which is the sequel, obviously, and I pity anyone who had to wait for this book to come out. It's absolutely the second half to A Psalm for the Wild-Billed. You have to read them together. If you're going to read them, buy them together. Don't just buy one. Don't be like, I'm gonna dip my toe in and see if I like it. No, if you don't like it, you still read both of the books. You still read both, because you can't make a good judgment unless you've read both, because one, though perfect in every way, is incomplete without the other. A Psalm for the Wild-Billed, just, it hit my soul that little bit harder than A Prayer for the Crown-Shy, but I still love them both very equally. Our lighting, it's disappearing. I told you. Following on the cozy vibes, I read Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry, which is a new and up-and-coming cozy fantasy. We follow our main character Viv. She is an orc, and she is laying down her sword and her lifetime of adventuring to open the very first cafe in the town that she has moved to. Along the way, we get to meet a cast full of characters that just become a family. In all honesty, I love every single one of them. Do you have the urge to own a cafe bookstore? Because it hit that spot for me. This is a low stakes fantasy, and we literally just follow Viv and all of her employees and friends as they literally build a cafe in the city. They start from scratch, they build the cafe, and they have to fill the menu with items. They have to satisfy what everyone wants. They have to like do marketing and advertisement to get people to come to the cafe. Like, the plot of this book is literally just building a cafe, and I loved it. I loved every page. I cannot wait to see what Travis Baldry comes up with next. I'm pretty sure at the end of this is a bit of an interview, and he says that the thing that he's writing next is within the same world but not the same characters, which 100% okay with. I will read anything that he writes now. I loved this also, and that was for the Sun space because it was a happy book, and it was a happy book. For the Root space, I listened to Harry Potter. Do I need to explain this? No. I then picked up Stone Fruit by Leli, and this was for the fertilizer space because I wanted it to nourish my soul, and as predicted, this nourished my soul in a really mental health way, not necessarily in like a really nice cozy soul nourishing way, in like a my feelings are validated kind of way. This is a beautifully illustrated graphic novel. We follow essentially 3 main characters. We have 2 women and a small child. The illustrations are gorgeous in this, and I really enjoy how the author really captures a really natural, lovely dialogue with also some just really nice realistic drawings as well. The emotions are really accurately conveyed, so A+. It's lovely, It has really good queer and non-binary representation and the absolute real life struggles that come from transitioning from a male to a female in a very Christian family. And my favorite panel of this, like of the whole story, is the recognition of how young children are just sponges. Even though their brains are not fully developed, they still take in and understand so many things that adults do and are and say. The next one was for the prop space, and I read Witch, The Power of Five. Don't know who the author is, it's not on the book. I do know that this is originally a graphic novel or a comic series that was written by an Italian author, and then it was taken by Disney, and then Disney like produced it and turned it into a TV show, which I was obsessed with. I was originally obsessed with the books though, like this is where it started. She is absolutely a reflection of the time that she was written. There's so many things in this that would not fly in a children's book these days. And I've already talked to you about my gripes about this. One thing that I was really disappointed in is the fact that the writing was particularly awful, and it was not at all what I remembered it being, which is really disappointing because I was really excited for just the nostalgia of everything. I was excited to jump back into, like, you know, the childhood feelings that came from this, and it was just really hard to get past the writing. So what I actually am gonna do is track down the graphic novel. I still want to know the story, but the comic graphic novel is like that little bit more palatable than these. The last book was for the water space, and we ended strong, guys. We really ended on a really good one. I listened to Cursed by Marissa Meyer, which is the sequel and the final book in the duology for the Gilded series, which is essentially just a Rumpelstiltskin fantasy retelling. We follow the two main characters, Cerilda and Gild, after the incredibly explosive ending of the first book. I've said it before, I'll say it again, but the audiobook format is really, really good for, I find, fantasy retelling, because it really has that storybook retelling vibe to it. Marissa Meyer is like the queen of retellings. They're loose enough as to like not be able to guess the plot, but they're true enough to the story that you still understand that you're reading a retelling. I also really enjoyed the duology format of this series. I find sometimes that young adult fantasy books, they are too long-winded, they end up being too many books. The amount of story that was packed into these two books was perfect. I think that there was a lot that happened, and it happened relatively concisely as well. If you like whimsical fairy tales with a good romance subplot in a fantasy series, then you will like this. I recommend this, particularly the first one before you read this one, obviously. I haven't filled in the bingo card just yet. So, sun was Legends and Lattes, tree was Jeanette McCurdy, prop was Witch, cacti was A Prayer for the Crown Shy, water was Cursed, fertilizer was Stone Fruit, earth was Coletucini, root was Harry Potter. I think that was it. Let's see if we can tick off just a few more. I don't think I got anything for the cloud or the moon spaces. However, for the tulip space, which is one about love, there was definitely some kind of love going on. Mole, the antagonist in Cursed, was a really, really good antagonist because I kind of liked him at some points. Ivy is a popular book, and I'm going to count Tomorrow Times 3 as a popular book because it was very popular and is currently very popular in the booktube world. Succulent was an easy read, and A Prayer for the Crown Shy, A Song for the Wild Bill, and Stone Fruit all count as that. Lotus is a book about disability, which was represented in Tomorrow Times 3. Green Carnation is an LGBTQ, and Stone Fruit covered that. Snail was a slow burn, and I'm absolutely not going to call the fact that I got that one because I did not finish Warcraft. I still read only one paragraph, so we don't get that. But this is the bingo card at the end of the bloomin readathon. I think I did pretty well. I read 13 books. That's so many. That is the end of the bloomin readathon. It's done. I'm a bit sad that I don't have purpose to my reading anymore, but it was a really fun experience. I did a takeover on the Instagram, which was also super, super fun. I've met so many new friends as a part of it as well, which is so lovely. I just had the best time. It was probably the most fun I've had reading this year. So really great end to the year, very strong end to the year, ready to launch us into 2023. That's the end. This is all I got for you for this month. So thank you for tuning in and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you're having a fantastic day or night or whatever time it is where you are in the world, and I will see you next week. Goodbye.